over fields of green, remembering the faces, the moments unseen, the hands that built a dynasty, the vision in their eyes, echoes in the auction barn beneath an endless sky. This is the bullvine, turn the volume high, for the icons of the ages that never will die. From the show ring thunder to the quiet strength they knew, hear their stories now, coming right on through.
Welcome to the Bullvine Podcast. I'm your host, and today I want to tell you one of the most incredible stories in Holstein history. It's a story about vision, persistence, and how sometimes the most extraordinary genetics come in the most ordinary packages. Picture this. It's April 26th, 1952. A quiet Saturday morning at Osborndale Farms in Derby, Connecticut. Nothing special happening. No fanfare, no celebration, just another bull calf being born. But folks, this wasn't just any calf. This was the beginning of a genetic revolution that would reshape the entire Holstein breed. The earth didn't shake that day, but it would later. Now here's where our story gets interesting. Professor James Osborn had already reserved this calf before he was even born. He'd even picked out the name, Ivanhoe. But when Professor Osborn saw this thin, scraggy little thing standing there on wobbly legs, he walked away. Just like that. Released his option to buy him. Can you imagine? The bull that would become the most influential Holstein sire in history was dismissed before he was even weaned. This teaches us something crucial about genetics, doesn't it? Visual assessment can be incredibly misleading, especially with young animals. But here's where our hero enters the story. Aldo Panciera. Remember that name. If there's one person responsible for Osborndale Ivanhoe's success, it's this World War II veteran from Rhode Island. Panciera owned Tumulum Farm in Westerly, and he had just made a bold decision to switch from Guernseys to registered Holsteins. 6 years earlier, in 1946, Panciera had attended his first Holstein sale, the Connecticut Bred Heifer Classic. He watched quality Phobes Albuquerque sell for $1,350, way beyond his budget, but he never forgot that cow. Fast forward to 1952, Panciera's back at Osborndale Farm with George Causey and Holstein Association fieldman Alan Crissy. They're looking at cattle for the New England fall sale. And there she is again, quality Phobes Albuquerque, along with her full sister. The scale, the dairy character, the quality of these animals just blew them away. But it was Gay's bull calf by Osborndale Ty Vic that caught Panciera's eye, that scrawny calf that Professor Osborn had dismissed. Where others saw failure, Panciera saw potential written in bloodlines and breeding records. He convinced Causey to join him. Each bought a quarter interest for $1,250. That's serious money in 1952. Folks, money they could hardly afford to lose. But Panciera was betting on genetics, not appearance. What happened next would test anyone's resolve. When Ivanhoe arrived at Tumulum Farm, his yearlings were, well, let's just say they weren't impressive. Shallow-bodied, rough over the rump, narrow at the heart. Night after night, Panciera walked past those gangly yearlings, each one a $1,250 question mark. Neighbors would stop by the fence, their silence speaking louder than any criticism. At the feed store, conversations would halt when he entered. The weight of that investment, money he couldn't afford to lose, pressed heavier with each passing month. The criticism was brutal. Other owners started using him sparingly. Charles Stroh, who'd acquired Mrs. Kellogg's interest after her death, focused on his $30,000 herd sire instead. Several AI studs openly boasted about turning Ivanhoe down. But Panciera? He persisted. Used Ivanhoe nearly 100% in his herd while the Holstein world watched and whispered about his foolishness. Then something magical happened. The first call came on a Tuesday morning in late 1957. "Aldo, you need to see this." His herdsman's voice carried excitement Panciera hadn't heard in years. In the milking parlor stood Ivanhoe's daughter. Not the awkward yearling from months before, but a cow of breathtaking dairy character, her udder tight and high, her frame displaying the kind of scale that made veteran dairymen stop and stare. When Ivanhoe's daughters began to freshen, those awkward yearlings transformed completely. The shallow bodies filled out with deep capacity, the rough rumps smoothed into elegant dairy character. The narrow hearts expanded with the chest depth that revealed true genetic potential. The turning point came at the 1957 Eastern States Exposition. Tumalum Ivanhoe Misty placed third in a class of 32 two-year-olds. Judge Harold Wilson paused mid-examination, his experienced hands tracing Misty's top line twice. 27 years of evaluating Holsteins had taught him to trust what he felt, not what he expected to see. This wasn't just another Ivanhoe daughter. This was proof that genetic potential could hide behind the most unpromising appearances. The timing was perfect. The dominant Burke bloodline had created Holstein cattle that were becoming increasingly close-coupled and short-legged. Dairymen across America were searching for new blood, cattle with stature and production capacity. Ivanhoe delivered exactly what they needed. By early 1958, word had reached the right people. Earl Groff, chairman of the SPABC Sire Committee, was traveling with Holstein classifier Jack Fairchild when Fairchild mentioned some impressive heifers by a bull named Ivanhoe up in Connecticut. By Monday morning, the committee was heading to New England. What they found exceeded their expectations. At Atlasta Farm, SL, Bickford drove them to the back pasture in his 12th Cadillac. Yes, his 12th. The man collected Cadillacs as a hobby and had invented the mechanized luncheon system. The Ivanhoe daughters were long, sharp, and uniform. At Tumalum Farm, their size, scale, and tight udders immediately caught the committee's trained eyes. A 12-pair dam-daughter comparison showed increases of 2,656 pounds of milk and 102 pounds of fat. When they met Ivanhoe himself, they encountered a genuine giant, 6 feet, 1 inch at the withers, up to 3,200 pounds of pure genetic power, one of the longest bulls in breed history. Now, managing a bull this size was no joke. The morning air at Atlantic Breeders carried the familiar sounds of a working dairy operation until Ivanhoe arrived. The metallic creak of reinforced gates, the hollow thud of hooves on specially raised platforms, and the low rumble of his voice echoing off modified collection room walls announced the presence of something extraordinary. When Ivanhoe arrived at the AI facility, they discovered the fences weren't high enough to contain him. He actually put a dent in the roof of the bull trailer, the only bull ever to accomplish that feat. Floyd Weidler, the production manager, had to completely remodel Ivanhoe's pen, raise the fence heights, built up his manger, created a special yoke so he could stand while eating. Even the collection room needed alterations. When his weight hit 3,200 pounds, his semen production declined. They had to reduce him to 2,800 pounds, a weight where you could count every rib. He developed arthritis and needed daily aspirin. His initial response to semen collection was poor, but gradually improved. Despite all these challenges, Weidler remembered him fondly. Quote, "He was a nice bull to work with for his size." The vindication Panciera had dreamed of began arriving one production report at a time. By 1964, the evidence was undeniable, not in show ring ribbons or magazine articles, but in the monthly data that dairy farmers across America received in their mailboxes. Across 5,599 dairy barns, from Vermont to California, Ivanhoe's daughters stood for classification. As scorecards accumulated, 82, 83, 84 points, a pattern emerged that no statistician could ignore. This scrawny calf was systematically upgrading American Holstein herds. When researchers compiled records from over 10,000 tested daughters across 2,200 herds, The numbers revealed plus 630 pounds of milk and plus 23 pounds of fat. For 8 consecutive years, from 1964 through 1971, Ivanhoe led the U.S. honor list. No bull has ever matched that achievement. Until the mid-1970s, he remained the leading sire of daughters, producing over 200,000 pounds of lifetime milk. His semen production was equally impressive. 100,187 first services, peaking at 24,500 in 1960. But Ivanhoe's true legacy wasn't written in record books. It was walking through America's dairy barns, carrying his genetic gifts to the next generation. The World Dairy Expo arena fell silent as Miss Ivanhoe Scranton entered the ring. Her measured gait, the distinctive height that marked her breeding, the perfectly attached udder that spoke of genetic excellence. Everything Panciera had envisioned 7 years earlier was now on display under the bright lights of Madison. Allen Glamorous Ivy made history as the first dairy cow ever to sell for $1 million at the 1983 Piermont Farm dispersal, an EX96 daughter from an EX96 dam. Miss Ivanhoe Scranton claimed grand champion honors at the 1969 World Dairy Expo. Her victory validated everything Panciera had believed about genetic potential. Fulton Way Ivanhoe Ray became the first cow to complete 8 consecutive records above 1,000 pounds of fat. Her peak record of 1,615 pounds at 7 years made her Ivanhoe's highest-producing daughter. But the crown jewel? Round Oak Ivanhoe Eve. Not for her individual achievements, but as dam of Round Oak Rag Apple Elevation, a bull many consider the best we've ever had. While Ivanhoe's sons couldn't match his daughter's excellence, several proved instrumental in extending his genetic reach. Hilltop Apollo Ivanhoe emerged as his most influential son. He sired Whittier Farms Apollo Rocket, who became the breed's high bull for predicted difference for milk in the mid-1970s. Plus 2,210 milk, plus 40 fat. Penn State Ivanhoe Star achieved lasting influence through his son Carlin M. Ivanhoe Bell, who became the second most influential bull of the mid-1980s in the United States. Maury Ivanhoe Prince earned gold medal status in 1968 and sired the first cow in the world to produce 50,000 pounds of milk. 3 seconds. To understand why Ivanhoe was so successful, we need to look at his genetic blueprint. Genetic analysis later revealed what Panciera had sensed instinctively. The Winterthur influence running through Ivanhoe's maternal line was the key to his transformative power. He magically transmitted the height, length, dairy quality, and productive talents of Springbrook Bess Burke II, a huge lady weighing over 2,200 pounds. From his sire came Mount Victoria bloodlines that contributed rag apple influence, genetic material that helped tighten udders and improve butterfat tests. As one analysis concluded, Ivanhoe was essentially Springbrook Bess Burke II, with the Mount Victoria bloodlines added, a synthesis that allowed him to reproduce all the good Ormsby traits: enormous size, stretch, height, and particularly the will to milk. The emotional weight of those early years never left Panciera. In February 1965, 2 years after Ivanhoe's death, he placed one of the most emotional advertisements ever published in a breed journal. The full-page spread in Holstein Friesian World featured Tumalum Ivanhoe Misty alongside Ivanhoe himself. The headline read, "He walked a lonely road, only to gain an army of friends." Panciera wrote, Ivanhoe's career began at Tumalum in 1953. During the years, his mammoth scale and awkwardness made him the subject of much criticism and controversy. Several studs boasted of having turned the bull down. The progeny left behind at Tumalum brought more achievements than we had hoped to gain in a lifetime. Ivanhoe's influence will guide our future through his daughters, sons, granddaughters, and grandsons. When Osborndale Ivanhoe died on November 25, 1963, at 11 and a half years old, he left behind a genetic legacy that continues influencing Holstein breeding decisions today. Even in death, his frozen semen commanded premium prices, sometimes several $1,000s for one ampule. Earl Groff captured Ivanhoe's impact perfectly. He got us on the right road to breeding better cattle. Today, that road continues through three primary channels. Through Round Oak, Ivanhoe Eve and her son Elevation. Through Penn State, Ivanhoe Star and his son Carlin M. Ivanhoe Bell. Through Proven Matin, Ivanhoe Jewel and his son Puget Sound Chic. So what can today's dairy producers learn from Ivanhoe's story? Today's genomic evaluations provide the genetic insight Panciera could only guess at, yet his fundamental lesson remains unchanged. Transformative genetics often arrive in unexpected packages. Modern producers, using genomic data alongside pedigree analysis, achieve 23% higher conception rates, but they still need Panciera's patience and genetic vision. The pressure to improve components while maintaining functional type remains unchanged. The need to balance production with longevity continues challenging breeders. The challenge of identifying truly transformative genetics persists in every breeding decision. Most importantly, Ivanhoe's legacy reminds us that revolutionary genetic improvements require the same qualities Panciera demonstrated: patience to allow genetic potential to fully express, courage to persist through criticism, wisdom to understand that transformative animals often appear in unexpected packages. From a thin, scraggy calf dismissed by his first potential owner to a bull whose influence spans 7 decades and continues growing, Osborndale Ivanhoe proves that in dairy breeding, it's not how you start, it's the genetic legacy you leave behind. The earth-shaking that began on that quiet Saturday in 1952 continues resonating through Holstein herds worldwide. A reminder that sometimes the most profound changes begin with the smallest whispers of possibility and the courage to listen. That's our story for today. For 2025, dairy operations facing volatile milk prices and rising input costs, Ivanhoe's story offers crucial guidance. Invest in genetic potential over visual perfection. Use comprehensive data rather than appearance-based decisions. And remember that today's disappointing genomic test might hide tomorrow's breed-changing sire. Thanks for listening to the Bovine Podcast. Until next time, keep breeding better cattle.
This is the bovine, turn the volume high. For the icons of the ages that never will die. From the show ring thunder to the quiet strength they knew. Hear their stories now, coming right on through. Oh, tell the tale, the bovine legends live.